Okay, the next threat is coral disease. Now, first off, a lot of people say to me, corals get disease? What's with that? And so the first thing I want to let you know is disease is normal. It's a normal part of any living organisms. And disease is defined as any impairment of a body function, a system, or an organ. We get sick. I get sick. I just got over a cold. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong with me or my environment. So it's not that corals have disease that worry us. Not at all. That's normal. It's if there are changes in levels of disease, then we start to get worried. Now, one thing people don't usually realize about disease is that this is our normal thinking about disease. It is caused by a biotic organism. These are your viruses and your bacteria. So I just had a cold, which means my body was attacked by a rhinovirus. That's what causes a common cold. But diseases can also be caused by abiotic factors in any living organism, humans, dogs, plants, corals. And that is environmental stressors, okay? And a very common example would be lung disease. If you go to the doctor and he diagnoses you with lung disease, all he's telling you is your lungs are not functioning normally. They're not oxygenating your blood properly. Not telling you why. Now that why could be you developed tuberculosis, or it could be because you have been smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day for the last 30 years. The underlying cause, biotic versus abiotic, may be very different, but the outcome is the same. Your lungs aren't working. The same is true for corals. So, when I finished up my PhD here at the University of Hawaii, and then I went out to the Florida Keys to do postdoctoral training in coral bleaching and disease. And when I went out there, I had in my brain all of the commercials about the Florida Keys, because I'd never been diving there before. I'd done all my diving out here, and I envisioned all these staghorn corals and branching elkhorn corals, because that's what all the commercials show, for the diver happily over that. And I went to the Florida Keys and I took my first dive. There were none, zippo. There were mounding corals, there were soft corals, there were other types. There was absolutely none of these elkhorn or staghorn corals, a type of coral called a crocodile. And I came up from my first dive and I turned to the lady I was training with and I said, "Debbie, where are your corals? What's happened?" And sad to say, in large part due to coral disease, these corals have been killed. Their populations have now been reduced by 90%. Both those main species that used to be the most common coral in the Florida Keys are on the endangered species list. They're gone. Now, that was a little mind-boggling for me, and I started talking to some of the people that grew up in the Florida Keys. So they were my age. I'm not that old yet, and they were telling me, "Gosh, Greta, you should have seen this when I was a kid growing up here. It was beautiful. We had elkhorn and staghorn all over here, and I could see the dead stumps." So I believed them. And I looked at them and I said, "You saw your reefs die in your lifetime, like 20 years or so?" And they're like, "Yeah." I had no idea that reefs could die that fast. I thought 100 years or something. These people saw their reefs die. They knew coral disease was a problem, but they didn't know it would kill their reefs. They had no idea. So when I came back here after training in that postdoctoral period, I said to myself, you know, Hawaii's reefs are the ones I'm concerned about, and what diseases do we have out here? Is it a problem for us? What does disease out here look like? And nobody had done any baselines. There were some focal studies here or a focal study there, but no one had set out to do focal or baseline disease studies. Now the key here about the baselines is if you don't know what level your reefs are at for disease levels, how do you know if it's increasing? You don't. So my first goal was to get out here, and I spent probably a good 5 years literally underwater surveying reefs archipelago-wide, main Hawaiian Islands, northwestern Hawaiian Islands, so that we could get these baselines and start to get an understanding of what diseases affect our reefs And are there any diseases that we should be concerned about, like they should have been concerned about back in the Florida Keys had they known? And from those, we've described about 17 different diseases. We know that disease is widespread, but the good news for us here in Hawaii is that disease is at a fairly low prevalence. And what that term means is that the proportion of corals that I look at, just within my survey area, that had any signs of any disease was actually quite low. So that's good. That means that we are ahead of the 8 ball. We still have good chance to help our reefs and make sure that they do not go down the same track that the Florida Keys reefs went down.